My name is Jannat and I'm going to talk about Introduction to Research in Communication. Research is the process of asking questions and finding answers. It applies the scientifically method. The other thing that you should know is the relationship of research. We have two types of research, the scholarly research and priorities research. In scholarly research, this actually means the formal and scientific research. You are trying to describe, determine, predict, and explain the evidence concerning the research. Also, there is something called the research theory. So, research theory, it sets concepts, definition, and prepositions that present the systematic view of the phenomena. When I say prepositions of the systematic view of the phenomena, I mean the process of finding the theory and defining the theory concerning the research thing. It's usually scientifically, and the answers should be in scientifically. And for you to find the scientific answers, you must know the characteristics of science. In characteristics of science, we can see that science is based on evidence. Science should be public. Science should be public record, and it must have self-corrections. There are many other more characteristics of science, but I have only touched a few concerning this in research. In questions, like when you want to do your research, you must have questions that consist the Communication Scholars Act. It can be of personal interest, social importance, or theoretical significance. But for you to determine these questions, you must follow the nature of questions. And when I say the nature of questions, you must consist of these four things: the questions of fact, questions of variable relations, questions of value, and questions of policy. I'm sure you must be asking yourself, what are these questions of fact? Questions of facts, these are questions that provide definitions. Questions of variable relation, they examine if, how, and what to do when a certain phenomena is related to the matter. Questions of value ask the subjective evaluations. And in questions of policy, they recommend the course of action.
Hi, my name is Ingler. I'm going to talk about Chapter 2, the research process, getting started. Researchers as a detective, they seek answer for questions which does not exist or exist but unknown to them. They will conduct and do the research to find the answer. The research process depends on your abilities, how you conduct and how you track down the information. In the research process, they have rules and traditions that must be followed by researchers. There are multiple paths that can select by researchers. Researchers must proceed the research which is logically and steadily, and be aware the obstacles which will be appear in the research process. There are two types of research model, which are deductive research model and inductive research model. The deductive research model is a model that theories guides the researchers on the investigation, gather data to access, and move from known position to data. Let me interpret the process. First, researchers will identify the research problem they will have a review and use the theory which exists to investigate their research, formulate the research question or hypothesis, design what method and procedure they want to use, gather data from people, collect and interpret it, and ask a new question to the research. Meanwhile, the inductive research model gathers and analyzes data framed around the research question, formulate hypotheses and theories based on data, and move from specific data to a more general explanation. The clear process is the researcher will identify the research problem first, develop the research question, design the method and procedures, gather data from people, interpret it, formulate the hypothesis, and develop the theory. The difference between these two process models are deductive research model uses the theory which exists to investigate their research, whereas the inductive research model not. Besides that, The inductive research model has more steps than the deductive research model, which in the deductive research model, the researchers no need to develop the research question and develop theories. The step between these two research models is also different. In the deductive research model, it formulates the research question and continuing the process, whereas in the inductive research model, it starts to develop the research question first, then after that, formulate the hypothesis from the data they get. Furthermore, researchers need to identify the research question. They can get ideas from their experience and media. To crack question, they can turn broad topic into preliminary question and consider what they want to assume in the question, and the most important thing is rephrase the question into clearly and concisely. Researchers can also get library resources. They can adjust questions as learning more and information that find into the question. There are many theories exist in research. For instance, use quantitative research to start a theory and use qualitative research to answer questions and develop a theory. A theory provides pattern to interpreting data, links one study to another, provide a framework on understanding how communicate concepts and issues are important, help us interpret the meaning of finding. After that, continuing the research process if it is flawed or dead, develop research study to fill in the gap, and answer the question that previous research answer raised.
In Chapter 3, we are going to learn about Introduction to Quantitative Research. You must be asking yourself, what is this quantitative research? So, quantitative research, this is research that is based on deductive models. The quantity is in the unit of analysis. And when you say in the unit of analysis, you must consider the frequency, the degree, the values, and the intensity. And in order for you to get greater precision and objectivity of this hypothesis, you must use statistics, and your statistics should be variable and readable. Other than that, you can also talk about the model for conceptualizing qualitative research. This model consists of the 5 steps. First thing, you must know the purpose of your hypothesis. After that, you must look into the literature of your hypothesis. Then, research questions and hypotheses should go hand in hand with your quantitative research. Then you must also consider the methods of the quantitative research and validity. In validity, it means, is this valid? Will this hypothesis be considered or not? That is what it means by saying validity. We're also introduced to how to create the foundation of hypothesis. There are 4 things. The first one is concept. When you say concept, you must think of the description of the certain hypothesis. And then construction, like you must have the theoretical definition of hypothesis. And then in variable, you must present the research questions that goes hand in hand with the quantitative hypothesis. The last one is operationalization, which means you must have variable measures concerning the hypothesis that you are going to talk about in your qualitative hypothesis. The other thing is about the research hypothesis. For you to consider and to get a valid research hypothesis, you must look at the following things. The first one, the hypothesis should be educated. And the guessings of this hypothesis should not be based on science, but it should be literature-based. The second thing, you must consider the nature of the relationship between 2 variables. After considering the nature of 2 variables, you must predict the research outcome. Is this research outcome the same thing that we want it to be or not? Then you can also study the design to test the relationship between the descriptive measure and the qualitative measure. It's also important to know that there are 2 types of qualitative research. We have the description and the non-directional. In directional hypothesis, this states the nature of direction. And in non-directional hypothesis, it states the current relation.
In chapter 4 is talking about the introduction of qualitative research. Qualitative research is effective in capturing complexity of communication phenomena, sensitive to the social construction of meaning, and emphasize the communication environment of interactors. Qualitative research can analyze its quality and for subjectively. Qualitative research is grounded in mutual simultaneous shaping. Mutual simultaneous shaping is happen here and now, and it will influence each other. It emphasizes on process, the holistic frame of interaction, give plausible explanation on what is observed. Furthermore, analytic induction is a research strategy. It is a research logic to collect data, develop analysis, and organize the presentation of research findings. It can explain the theories emerged from the data. The model of qualitative research model is an independent stage. It revises the design after considering the impact of each component. From the graph that shows, the top triangle reflects the design of the project, while the bottom triangle reflects activities in the field. Question in qualitative research is based on previous literature and non-directional. It gives researchers in following interesting path and specific to the interaction context. When creating the question, assessing the question by asking, does the question ask how or what? Is the question non-directional? Does it reference the research site? Does the question focus on the specific type of interaction? Discover how meaning is developed, share, explore the influence of the context. In quantitative research, anything can observe and capture is count as data. The statement that interpreting meaning, for example, researchers constructors subjective valuing and contingent accuracy. Assess the level of evidence. Is this micro level, middle level, or macro level? The advantage of qualitative research is the document they create are unseen, provide information for who cannot speak for themselves, and give supplement information for qualitative studies. Meanwhile, the limitation of qualitative research is researchers must make sure that the communicate environment is accessible. When doing research, interactors will change their behavior and it is a waste of time to do it. When collecting the data, researchers need to focus on the reliability and validity of the technique and process so the report will show accurate and reflect the communication that observed. If the researchers miss it, the data will have problems such as inaccuracy, incompleteness, the problem of interpretation, selection bias, and reactivity bias. Comparing the qualitative research and quantitative research, each has advantages and limitations. The key similarities of these two methods are both rely on empirical evidence, provide useful information for describing, understanding, and explaining human communication behavior. Need to develop a complete picture of communication. However, the key difference between these two methods are in quantitative research, it uses number while qualitative research uses detailed description. In quantitative research, the participants are being randomly selected, whereas qualitative research participants are selected for the purpose. In qualitative research, the research will be deeply contextualized, while quantitative research will remove some. Besides that, qualitative research relies on interpretive frame, whereas quantitative research relies on formal logic. From that, researchers can choose which type of method they want to use, and they can select the method that is suitable to their research. Researchers can use triangulation in qualitative research, which means the multiple data and sources in research. To develop an understanding phenomena, it can test the validity of the information from different sources. There are many types of triangulation, for example, data triangulation, investigator triangulation, theory triangulation, methodology triangulation, and others. Data triangulation is involves time, space, and person. Investigation triangulation involves multiple researchers in an investigation. Theory triangulation involves using more than one theoretical theme in the interpretation of the phenomenon. Methodology triangulation involves using more than one method to gather data, such as interviews, observation, questionnaires, and documents.
In Chapter 5, we are going to learn about research and ethics. All researchers have the responsibility to conduct ethical research. Apart from that, the participants should understand and know their rights and responsibilities. In ethical questions, there are two main broad ethical responsibilities. The first one is the scientific responsibility, and the second one is the relationship between the researchers and the participants. In scientific responsibility, as a researcher, you must follow the guidelines that are worth the knowledge that you're going to yield from your research. And the other responsibility is that for a researcher, you must build a very valuable relationship between you and the participants that we are going to conduct the questions and conduct the research. In research, you must follow the ethical questions. And the ethical questions consist of the 5 W's and 1 H. The 5 W's, the who, what, when, where, why. Why are you conducting this research? Who are you targeting? How is it going to be conducted? At what time? Other than that, it is also known that in research, they follow the Belmont Report. What is this Belmont Report? This Belmont Report is the way of conducting research that is adopted by the federal department. The federal department follows the Belmont Report that has 3 main ethical principles, which is the beneficence, respect for the person, and justice. And the main aim of this Belmont Report is to design study to uphold these principles clearly. That's why when you are conducting research, you have to follow the Belmont Report in order to attain the main goal of designing the study that will uphold these principles. Even I learned about ethical issues in conducting research. The first issue, it should be about the intention of the deception. And then you can use the confederate. You can also use the physical and psychological harm. And then apart from that, we also have the ethical issues in reporting research. If you want to report research, you must follow these 3 main reporting research ethical issues. The first one is accuracy. Your research should be accurate to what you have been studying and what you have been researching, and it should be accurate for you to follow the guidelines that you got from your participants. The other thing is avoid plagiarism. Even if you try to do your own document and finding your own research by reading other articles, you must try your best to avoid plagiarism so as to avoid copycat thing. The other one is protect the identity of participant. This identity of participant should be hidden. You're not supposed to let it out so that everyone knows.